feeding tent was affectionately called by the workers down there the Taj Mahal, and it was a big white tent where we had kitchens set up where workers and first responders, police, everybody could come in and get a hot meal. It also warehoused all of the supplies that were donated and bought and purchased to help all the workers and the first responders. And we packed up different things when there were 3 different sites out along the ground zero perimeter. And the feeding tent and the warehouse tent would supply those other sites that were off. They were called Site 2 and 3. And so that's what that did. The workers would come in out of the pit and come in and get a hot meal, and we would sit there and talk to them. They like to talk. We just listened, and a lot of them spilled their feelings out about it, and it was quite moving at times because they would be open to talking about what they were experiencing at the time. A good experience that came out of my time at Ground Zero was a friend that I met. Her name is Evita Grossman. She was an internal affairs police woman, but they were all called in off duty and became patrol persons so she had her uniform on, and we struck up conversations. And it's funny how we met, because they closed down the nice bathrooms that they had set up for us at the tent, and my hotel was just 2 blocks away, and I was not going to use one of those porta potties that everybody and his brother used out there. And I told her that I was walking back to my hotel to use it, and she said, "Oh, I don't like them either." So she came with me, and we talked on the way there and on the way back. We just struck up a friendship. We have remained close over the years. I went up for her engagement party. She came down when Chuck and I got married. Chuck and I went up to her wedding. And we've been up there to meet her children, and we've just stayed friends over the years. She's a great person, and I love her. The 20th anniversary of 9/11 has special meaning to me. It's a date I will never forget. I know many people say that, but it's one that I will never forget because it impacted my life personally. My daughter-in-law, Dana, who lived up in the Maplewood, New Jersey area, but worked in downtown Manhattan. She worked in the building in one of the towers. I don't remember which one exactly, but she worked in one of the towers, and she had gone into work a little bit late that day because I guess as it turned out, she and my son had a little disagreement about her working so many hours, so she stayed home a little bit later that morning so that they can talk, and she went in late, which made her arrive into the tower a little bit later, or else she would have been up on the one of the top floors where she worked. So when she arrived there at the World Trade Center, she came out on the mezzanine level, and she saw people exiting the building. They weren't panicked at that time, but she was told to get out, and she did, and she realized what was going on, and she ran almost 100 blocks to catch the ferry to take her back home to New Jersey, and we didn't know anything about it. We couldn't get in touch with her for over 6 hours. So it was quite a heart-wrenching experience for us, and I'll never forget that. It's affected her life. Even today, she has trouble, with it sometimes. So what I did when I was up there at Ground Zero, this was in December, and I was able to drive one of the John Deere Gators. It was one of the vehicles used to get around the streets of Lower Manhattan around where Ground Zero was. The streets were all torn up and very rugged and very kind of dangerous. But as I drove around to the different sites, the different supply tents, they called them Site 2 and Site 3, I was able to witness some of the destruction and see firsthand some of the destruction of the buildings. And I saw some of the restaurant owners and kind of in despair because their businesses were gone. And it was sad. I would see the memorials that were being set up by the people who had lost loved ones, the people who were still looking for information about their loved ones that were missing. There were those memorials set up all over the place. And I drove by one of the firehouses that were definitely struck by and affected by the collapse of the buildings. I would go out to the sites and I would see some of the iron workers and the first responders, policemen, priests, firemen. They would go to these sites where they would get different supplies. They might need refreshments, hot coffee, hot cocoa, gloves, batteries, anything that they could use that would be supplied from the main tent, the Taj Mahal. I would carry those things out to those sites and restock their supply out there. And like I said, I got to meet different people. I also had to maintain the gator myself, which means I had to put the gas in it and I had to check the oil. And one time I forgot to turn off the motor when I pulled the oil cap off, and it kind of exploded all over me and it got hot oil on me, but it didn't burn. I was still fortunate for that. But that was what I got to do, and I did enjoy that. Even though I was up there in December, a couple of months after the attack on the towers, the devastation around the ground zero area, the red zone, was still pretty rough. We had a hotel that was just a couple of blocks away, so we would walk from our hotel down to ground zero, to that site, and as we walked, we saw buildings that were shattered windows and walls coming down and streets broken up, and there were just a lot of destruction. When I rode on the gator to go to the various sites, I had to go around all kinds of piles of debris. There were no straight through streets that I could get to each of the sites. My gator would go over some piles of rubbish and concrete, and it was just, it was pretty devastating. I had to go all the way around outside of the financial center to get over to one of the sites, so it was pretty destructive. And like I said, they had construction fences and things like that set up around it, and on those fences the people had put pictures and flowers and different things of memorial sites, so it kind of tugged at your heart when you would see those things, that I would see those things, and it just made me so grateful that I could, that I was alive and that my daughter-in-law was alive. And one of the things that really struck me is right at the tent, the Taj Mahal, right outside of it, was where they placed that big, or I think the cross, that's how it landed, but there was a piece of metal that had formed into a cross, and it's been seen all over Facebook and all over the different media sites. But that was right outside the Taj Mahal, and you can look at that, and it just gives you a sense of peace in all of that chaos that was going on there at that time.